Okay, boys and girls, this is grammar page 93. We're continuing with learning independent clauses and dependent clauses. And today we're going to be adding commas into our sentences when we attach a dependent clause to the beginning of a sentence. So first, let's look at the rules at the top of your page. So the first rule is when an independent clause begins a sentence, it is usually not followed by a comma. Did you notice that that's a complex sentence? It starts with the word when, a subordinating conjunction, which makes that a dependent clause. It's a dependent clause about an independent clause with a comma followed by an independent clause. So there you go. But anyway, when an independent clause begins a sentence, not like in this sentence, it is not usually followed by a comma. Okay, now that I thoroughly confused you. The second rule, when a dependent clause begins a sentence, it is usually followed by a comma. Here you can see that. This is a dependent clause, comma, independent clause. Okay, the third rule is a complex sentence includes an independent clause and one dependent clause that is introduced by a subordinating conjunction. Remember, those are the words like before, when, and so on that we learned about before. Okay, so we're going to combine each independent and dependent clause. We're going to use commas correctly. That means that if our dependent clause comes first, then we are going to put in a comma, but otherwise we don't. Okay, so let's look at number one. Our school day ends. So I ask myself, is this a sentence by itself? So what is my subject? Our school day is the subject. The predicate is ends. So that is a sentence by itself. So that would be an independent clause. When the bell sounds at 3:30, that is not an independent clause. That's dependent. And it starts with a subordinating conjunction. So when we write this sentence, it will go like this. Our school day ends. Okay, we don't need a comma because the independent clause came first. So I just make lowercase w on when the bell sounds at 3:30, period. Okay? All right, unless I have soccer practice, I go home and do my homework. So unless I have soccer practice, that makes me feel like there's more information to be had. So I look at my first word. There's unless I have that subordinating conjunction. Look at the second sentence. I go home and do my homework. Subject, I. What's the verb? Go and do. Go home and do my homework. So that one's an independent clause because it does not have a subordinating conjunction. The dependent clause does have a subject and a predicate. I is the subject, have soccer practice is the predicate, but it has that conjunction in the beginning. That's why it's a dependent clause. So the dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence. I'm going to make the point of my pencil smaller because it's kind of blobby looking. Okay. So because the dependent clause comes first, I need to put a comma into my sentence. So I'm going to write it like this. Unless I, have, sorry, I've dragged my finger there, soccer practice, comma, I go home and do my, homework. Period. Okay. Number 3, my dad picks me up. Subject, my dad. What does dad do? Picks me up. Okay, let's look at the second sentence. When mom has to work late. Feels like I need more information. Let's check it out. The subject is mom. What does she do? Has to work late. I have this word that's sticking out here that is my subordinating conjunction. So subordinate or dependent clause comes second, no comma. My dad picks me up. No punctuation marks, lowercase w, because I'm in the middle of the sentence. When mom, it's capitalized, it's being used like her name. Dad isn't capitalized because you're saying my dad. If your dad's name is Bill, you wouldn't say my Bill picks me up. So my dad picks me up when mom, being used like her name. So if her name is Sylvia, then you would say my dad picks me up when Sylvia, so that works, has to work late, period. Okay, I'm going to scroll down a little bit and we'll keep going. We're going to do this all together. Okay, so number 4. If school is closed early, feels like I need more information. Let's check it out. School is the subject. The predicate is closed early. I have this extra word over here. Oops. Keep doing that. This word ifs, that must be my subordinating conjunction. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, picks me up. So what's my subject? My neighbor, Mrs. Carter. What does she do? Picks me up. So my dependent clause is at the beginning, so I will need a comma where the period currently is, and then continue my sentence. If school is closed early, comma. Now I don't need to capitalize my because it's not the beginning of a sentence anymore. My neighbor, sorry, dragged my finger again, comma, still need the comma here. That's called an appositive. You're saying who your neighbor is. So my neighbor, comma, Mrs., capital M, period after Mrs., capital C, Carter. Sorry, drag my finger again. Comma. So you need a comma after neighbor and after Carter. Picks me up. Period. Okay, let's look at number 5. Because there were so many snow days last year. Okay, more info? Doesn't sound like it. We have to stay an extra half hour. That is a complete sentence. We as the subject have to stay an extra half hour is the predicate. In our first sentence, there is, actually this one's confusing. Snow days are actually the subject and were is your predicate, but you have the word because at the beginning. Don't worry about the construction of that sentence. That's not a good one for third graders to have to analyze. It's not even a good one for a third grade teacher to have to analyze, to be honest with you. So capital B on because. There were so many snow days last year. Okay, dependent clause at the beginning. So instead of a period, I put a comma. Now, we has to be lowercase because we're in the middle of the sentence. We have to stay an extra half hour. We had to make up actual days, not half hours. I was in school and had snow days. Okay, so there you go. That is how you write sentences with dependent clauses and independent clauses, complex sentences. And when your dependent clause is first, you must put a comma. Well, not must. Most of the time, you put a comma after it, but you don't necessarily when your independent clause is first. So there you go.